Welcome everyone, my name is Ann Walsh, and today I am here with Tanya Van Eyck, who is an herbalist and who is also the owner of Be Wild Herbs in Merrickville. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me in this beautiful spot.
Yes, it's nice. We thought we'd do it in nature because of what she does for a living. So, Tanya, this being an herbalist is a second career for you. So what prompted your transition from your real job to your dream job?
Well, I've actually had many other careers in the past, but my last one was doing kind of IT project management, and I was just wasn't satisfied. Right, it wasn't helping anyone. It was, didn't seem to be any long-term purpose behind it, and so I decided to move out to Ontario to be near my family. I came from BC, and I just took a year off, just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I thought it would be in growing food, maybe, and writing and photography. I was just all over. And then I started thinking about healing, and I found Judy Henry, who ended up being my first teacher. I did an apprenticeship with her, and even then, like, I was only doing 1 day a week. I was still doing project management online, and at the end of that, I was fascinated. I was making my own medicines already. I was kind of using some of the skills I learned. But it just kind of grew. Like, there was no big aha moment. I didn't decide right then and there I was going to quit everything else. I had started making Christmas presents and, studying. I kept studying plants and going out and finding more in the wild. And before you know it, years had passed and it had become something bigger in terms of making medicines. So I was making a lot of medicines, harvesting, and then from there it's continued to grow. So then it enveloped a little bit more of the educational side, and now doing clinical, like seeing people for health consultations as well. So I don't know, it's not a big story like I wasn't super sick and then made myself better and all those great stories. I didn't have one of those, but I've always been interested in natural healing. Like, since I was in my teens, I was already right up on the microbiome because back people knew about it. Yeah. So it's always been kind of a passion. And yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. It does. So we were trying to get together in August, and you were a very busy woman, harvesting throughout all of August. And so tell us about the cyclical nature of your work.
Right. Yeah. So every time of year is special for certain things, and every plant has its time. Certain times of the year we're going for roots, and so we tend to do that more in the fall, and barks in the early spring. Yeah. And then, of course, flowers when it's flowering. So right now we have, I don't know if you can see it, we have New England asters flowering. So this is what I've just harvested. So basically, it goes from about March, when I'm starting with the barks and such things. You can also do roots in March. It's basically a little bit harder to do roots. You have to wait for the ground to thaw. But I start with barks in March, and then it ends with roots in November. So then I've got a few months to kind of just, get rested. And plan for new things, coming up with new ideas, new protocols, and learning more. Right? There's always more learning.
And you were talking about, when I talked to you, you were drying stuff.
Yes.
So you need a specific amount of area to dry, or is it outdoors?
Yes. I actually do. I have in my shed, I have a large dryer, and that one I haven't been able to use much in the last few years because it's been so humid. And so you're basically blowing humid air on it. So I have an indoor dryer. I have like a Excalibur kind of dehydrator, but then I also have a big hanging one that's like expandable that I have a fan on. So it's kind of like that. And then most of the medicines that I gather, I do use fresh, and I don't dry them. So that helps. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to keep up with it. And then I create tinctures and oil extractions and things like that from the more fresh stuff.
You need a lot of space and hydro.
Yeah, the hydro is, they've contacted me a couple of times to say, whoa, it's so high. Do you want to want us to assess your house? I'm like, no, it's just my business.
Yeah. They're probably like, let's check her out.
Yeah.
Let's go see what she's growing.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on at her
Not
property.
so much now anymore, but yes.
So your work sounds fascinating to me. The harvesting, the researching, the making of medicines. So tell us about, like, bring us through a day in the life of an herbalist.
Okay. So I have 3 roles as an herbalist right now. So I'm making medicine, I'm doing some teaching, and then I've got my clinical work. So a day will be sometimes mix of those 3. I try not to because it's really hard on my brain to just mix them up in one day. But let's say it's a day where it's a harvest day. It's a making medicine day. So that might involve, of course, I work out of my home, so I have to sterilize the area before I even leave to go harvesting. Once the dew is dried on the plants, I'll go out and I harvest them. I usually will have found certain places in the previous year, so I know what time of year and when things will probably be optimal. Right. And I have people that call me now and text me and say, hey Tanya, the hawthorn's looking good, or so-and-so has elderberry. It's like, that's one of the most wonderful things. So sometimes I just get a call and I just go. So I spend the morning gathering usually, and which is what my favorite thing. You're out in the wilds. It's quiet. Everything becomes still. You're only just you and the plants, and it's meditative for me. I come home feeling like just blissed right out, and I think it's like my old ancestral, like all of us have that in our ancestry, right? Gathering things from the wild, and there must be something going on there. So then I come home and I process the herbs. So it depends. Processing is different depending on what I've gathered. Then I will process it and then turn it into a tincture or put it out for drying or infuse it. And then the rest of the day might be filtering out the ones that are ready. So we usually have about 6 weeks it takes to finish a medicine that we're using in a liquid extraction. And so there's making product, right? So between those 3, that's kind of what I'm busy doing. And now I have a plan every year. I know how much I need to harvest of everything, so it makes it easier. But that would be a typical medicine making day for me.
Sounds like fun.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
So tell us about the philosophy behind the work that you do.
Right. So talking clinically, I can speak to that. In terms of harvesting, the philosophy is really a reciprocal kind of relationship. You don't ever take more than you need. You develop a relationship with the plants and the areas that you go into. You're respectful. You make sure you find clean places. And I think I already said never take more than you need.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a really important thing for me. As far as when it comes to helping people feel better, herbalists really work on treating the person, not the disease. There's that doesn't exist really. I mean, they exist. Obviously, someone may have been to a doctor and have a prognosis, but we will look at the whole person, what they're like now, but also how they have been throughout their whole life. Yeah. Everyone has a constitution. Everyone has a weakness. So maybe they, as a child, they had a lot of lung infections, so so those are part of their whole being. Whether they like hot or cold weather, if they tend to more dryness, so you might have that as your normal constitution. But then, let's say you have some kind of dis-ease, then that's another thing we need to take into consideration. So we even if there is a prognosis, it isn't okay. Well, let's use this herb for that disease. Yeah, it would not work like that.
Like a chart like this, and then goes to
because there is it's not like one pill fits everyone. Yeah, the plants don't fit everyone in every situation, and then we combine them to make them to optimize them for each person, but also for their where they are in the path of the ill health that they have right now. What I like to think of it as, we talk about terrain a lot, and so I like to think about using a metaphor of the garden. So the way we care for a garden is we look at the soil and we work on the soil. So that's part of the terrain. That's a lot of the terrain. The plant itself is part of it, and And then you've got all the environmental factors of weather, but you're caring for it. You're adding things to the soil to optimize the soil so it can be as healthy as possible. You're watering, you might be feeding, and you're bringing in beneficial insects to help. So this is how I see really how the herbalist works as well. Is how do you build a healthy garden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's kind of part of it.
From the ground up.
One of the things that I like to do is, or when people are working with me, they learn. We forget about our bodies. Our bodies are just there to take us from A to B, and we ignore it. And we just abuse it so much, and we need to make a little bit of space for healing sometimes, right? Like, we need to remember that we have a body and what it feels like to feel good, right? Like, we don't remember what it feels like to feel good, most of us. And I like the idea of also just making space for healing. So, as an example, let's say, that's kind of like esoteric, right? But if someone has chronic pain, chronic inflammation, the body, like, that inflammatory process has now become harmful. And there's no space for healing. And so, in a way, what we're doing is we're creating the space. Like, the body is such an intelligent, amazing organism. It knows exactly what needs to happen in order to find a balance and to come back to health.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we need to make that little bit of space.
Yeah.
Right? So so if we're swinging on the pendulum like way wide, if we're coming more into balance, this is, the constant little changes, that's what our body does really well at. So that's what we're trying to do, is help with rebalancing a little bit there, and to make space so that the healing can come. Mm-hmm. So maybe you need to sleep so that you can detoxify and heal in your sleep. Mm-hmm. That's that kind of idea.
Yeah. Sounds very gentle.
It's gentle and powerful, but what it is it's working with the flow rather than trying to force any kind of flow.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I looked at your website and I saw you had a lot of products. And I was fascinated. Just scrolling through, going, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Mm-hmm. What are your best sellers?
Well, my best sellers correlate with the thing that people have the most issues with for the most part. I mean, there's some bestsellers that are just happen to be really great for, poison ivy or things like that. But mostly what I'm seeing is musculoskeletal issues. So those are, I have like topical products there that are really popular. And some of them are specialized towards specific, like carpal tunnel, for instance.
Yeah.
Eczema, it seems like everybody, especially little ones now, have a lot of issues with eczema. So I have a couple of products like that. And then everything kind of like there's a triad of sleep, stress, and burnout, right? So there's a few things I have there. And so when I'm at markets, for instance, I usually spend, 10 minutes or so helping, asking questions to see where they are in that path, like what would help them more. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes you need the hammer. Sometimes you need to sleep, right? Yeah. Sometimes you need a little bit of support. And now I'm developing a line of things that are kind of like do-it-yourself, food like remedies, let's say. That's not really the right word, but so the ones I've started with is elderberry kit, so you can make your own.
Cool.
So the elderberry, of course, syrup is very popular since COVID, and I'm really happy to see people are using it earlier on to build up their immune system. But it's not affordable for a family, so I wanted to make up some kits. So with the instructions, so you got everything you need. You just add water and you add your own honey or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also doing sort of a bone broth or a broth, a wild mix of herbs that are really integral to building a strong immune system. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these were used like by our ancestors as well, like something beautiful like as a pot herb and help with the immune system. And so I'm going to keep expanding on that because I really like people to be able to have those things that you can take on a daily basis that are tonic, that they can make themselves.
Yes. My grandma was big into stock. She would make her bone broth. Always, before she made anything, she would start with the broth. Yeah. And her nails, we couldn't clip her nails. They were so strong. And her toenails, and it was just like, what are you eating? And I think it was the broth, just the collagen.
collagen, all the minerals. Like it's an elixir. It's amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, I make that and I make it into ice cubes, and then if I'm really feeling dilapidated in the middle of the day, I just throw one in, some hot water over it, some miso, some soy sauce, some tamari, and it's like I can feel my life
Reboot.
force coming back.
It's like a reboot.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and simple. I mean, it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, this is pretty simple stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I love that you work in layers. We were talking about this over the phone last time.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got different layers from, you know, alleviating the symptoms, which I
Mm-hmm.
like that you start there,
Mm-hmm.
because if somebody's uncomfortable, they just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you can talk to them about philosophy and all this kind of stuff. But if
Yeah.
they're in pain,
Yeah.
they just want the pain to stop.
Exactly.
So alleviating the symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
balancing,
Mm-hmm.
and then building resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So take us through this process.
Right. So you know, these are like roughly 3 phases that are actually not discrete. So they may actually overlap with each other. I actually try to always overlap, anyways. But you're right. Like, if someone can't sleep, they can't heal.
Yeah.
Also, the second reason why it's good to start there when you can is that it encourages people to go on. It gives them the energy, because to come to full healing, depending on how complex the situation is, people need to be encouraged. They need to feel empowered, and they need to have the energy to see it through. Because most people who come to see me come to see me last. You know,
Yeah.
they've tried everything else, and now they come to see an herbalist. And so there are usually a lot of chronic things that I see. So it's good to get that enthusiasm, that energy, have a win up front. That's not always possible, because especially with chronic things, there are so many layers that need to be helped sometimes before they can feel better. So that's where our goal is. And then second would be, so you've got okay, let's try and help you feel good on the more superficial level. Then we go a little bit deeper, and now we're working at, like you said, balancing, building more resilience. You know, that pendulum swing I was talking about. We're trying to get that pendulum to now come more into the center. And then finally, now we're kind of more centered and running well. But the idea is not to continue taking medicine forever, to stay there. It's about, you know, lifestyle and food. So finally, in the final so-called phase would be now rebuilding. So I'm going to give an example. I think that might be easier. So let's say someone has had chronic sleep issues. So the first phase, or whatever, the first layer is like I said, get these people to sleep right now, right? Because so this will be a little bit more sedating kind of herbs. You'd probably only use them at night. So then, if this person's had a chronic sleep problem, we need to look at why are they not sleeping. So we would be looking at sleep hygiene. We'd be looking at you know, what's waking you up. Are you drinking a lot of coffee? Are you drinking too much water and getting up to pee? But mostly what I begin to look at pretty quickly is looking at some of the we call adaptogens. So they're like endocrine tonics. So resetting the circadian rhythm. And I find, like, so one of my favorite herbs for this is ashwagandha, and it really helps people, especially people who don't have a hard time falling asleep, but they have a hard time staying asleep. So then we do that, so that may take months. You'd probably start feeling better already within weeks, and you're able to sleep, but you need to continue that until we're actually getting to that pendulum in the center. And then, and this would, like I said, these might be happening kind of at the same time as well, but I try not to do too many things at once with people. In the later stages, we'll probably be continuing the balancing, and we'll start adding more things to actually nourish the body and rebuild in case if it is an organ or a system. Actually, that's more through nutrition. So we would be looking now at some of the metal and things like that they can use as a daily infusion. So that would be also including the right nutrients in the diet, and continuing with good sleep hygiene. So that the whole point of getting to that final layer is that this is now where they can hopefully continue on their own, with maybe once in a while a check-in with some extra help.
And they already know about the ashwagandha. So if they if they
Yes.
needed to go back,
Yes.
they already know,
Yeah. Yeah.
what it is and where to find it.
And in the meantime, through that whole process, they've also learned in, those steps. Okay, in the beginning, we give you something to sleep more easily. There's not as much expected of you. But at each level comes along, you're doing more and more. Like,
Yeah.
okay, did you go for your walk? Did
Yeah.
you get some time in nature? Did you, do this with your diet, right?
Yeah.
So I try to make that gentle because some people just give me the list, I'll do it all at once.
Yeah.
That happens once in a while. But most of us, including me, we need to incorporate one new thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of why it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not just it's not just a protocol.
Yeah. And you see your relationship with your clients as a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of empowerment through education, like
Mm-hmm.
teaching them about the different herbs and how they can grow them at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are some of the herbs, basic herbs, that you would recommend people grow at home, and why?
So that kind of depends on how much space people have. Like,
Okay.
assuming that someone only has some pots, like enough space for some pots on a balcony, I really like to think of most of the plants that are in the mint family. So that would include the mints, the lemon balm, maybe some catnip, but also the antimicrobial, the things that really help with lung health, so like your thyme, sage, very good and rosemary for mental health. So those ones that can live in your garden throughout our harsh winters, without a lot of work, without a lot of space requirements, that you can incorporate in your food right away. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones I usually would start with. I would also recommend calendula. Everyone should have calendula. It just keeps on giving. Once you have it, it just keeps growing. It's a beautiful thing to use for any kind of wounds or skin issues. You can make your own salves, but you can, like I said, put it in your use as a pot herb. It's called pot marigold for a reason. It used to be a pot herb, right? So in the winter, people would use it as a way to boost their resilience. Mm-hmm. And it's great for the digestion. It's not a yummy one, but it's really, like I said, it keeps on giving.
Yeah. Put it with something else that tastes yummy.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, and so that's what we would do anyways with the tea. If you tend to have a dry constitution, you're going to add a bit of marshmallow kind of thing. Like, we don't just say, take a whole bunch of turmeric for reasons. People like that doesn't necessarily work.
I love turmeric.
Yeah, but if you have a very dry constitution, it can be a little bit drying, right? And so, you have to, but that's where listening to your body comes in. Mm-hmm. You love turmeric. That means it is exactly probably the right thing for you. If you started getting some discomfort, it would probably be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be taking so much of it. The other thing I would recommend for everybody is if you have a little patch, like I have a 2-foot square patch in my garden in one little corner, and I grow my nettle there. It hasn't spread. I shouldn't say that this year. For some reason, it spread into a couple of pots. I don't know why, but and it gives me enough for my tea for the whole year. You don't have to have a lot. The seeds are also fantastic, but just starting with the leaves, especially in the spring. Oh, I made nettle chips this year. Like, how you make kale chips, but the nettle chips, so superior to kale chips. But and also nutrition-wise, they're so much superior to almost everything. They are just a wonder food. They are our superfood.
Who knew? Nettle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes. And how much would you put in a tea?
So I would call these infusions. So when you're using something like a nettle, you could use nettle as a tea, let's say, if you wanted to help with allergies, if you wanted to look more at the medicinal side. But if you wanted to really extract all the nutrients, we make what's called an infusion. So that's quite a big amount. So what you do is a larger amount. So let's say what I do is I have a bodum.
Yeah.
I fill it about a quarter to a third. So that's about an ounce for a liter, roughly speaking. You don't have to be precise. You pour your hot water over that. You let it steep for 4 hours or overnight.
4 hours?
Yeah.
Holy.
So because you're trying to extract all the nutrients. So we're thinking about like when you were talking about bone broth. It takes a while to extract all the minerals and everything out of there. And so this will then give you a really rich tea that is just so full of minerals and vitamins, iron, protein. It's really a superfood, and that's how you can also soak it in apple cider vinegar, and that will extract the minerals really nicely. And I do that every year. I do all the spring herbs in vinegar, and then I soak them. So that's how you would take something like, and there are many other herbs you would take in that fashion.
Yeah.
You know, things like red clover or oat straw, the ones that are really known for their deep nutritive value.
Yeah.
You do those long steeps.
Interesting. 4 to 5. I thought you were going to say 4 to 5 minutes, and then you said 4 to 5 hours. It's not a spontaneous thing. I think I'll just.
I find the easiest thing to do is you just, you do it at night because you have lots of nettle here. You can't pick it at this time of year, but next spring.
Yeah.
So, you just steep it overnight. In the morning, you strain it. That's why I like the Bodum, because you just plunge it.
Yeah.
And then I just add a little bit, like half to a cup, and add hot water. In the winter, I like it to be a bit warm.
Yeah.
So you can use it like that. You can put it in your soups.
Cool. Smoothie.
You can make it like a hearty tea, like add some tamari. Because it's got a bit of umami, it's high in protein, so you could use it as that kind of a hearty, almost like a broth in a cup. Yeah, there's myriad of ways to use.
I was thinking I needed to write this down. I'm like, oh no, we're filming it. I can just watch this.
Oh my God, no, I hope I said everything right.
Yeah, exactly. But you said. So what are some of the common ailments that you treat in your practice?
Well, I started my practice only last year. I shouldn't say that. I had unofficially had a practice for quite a while, with people coming to me and me making custom medicines for them. But I've been really more into it for this past year. And what I am seeing, like I kind of alluded to before, people will come to me more often when they've kind of done everything else and it hasn't worked for them, or, this is the kind of thing I see. So a lot of chronic inflammation and digestive issues. Even though they may be chronic, they can be really one of my favorite things to help with. They're one of the easiest things, not so much when it comes to food sensitivities, because there's a lot of work to be done there. From the client side, I know it's tough, but it does sometimes. Sometimes it's more about food sensitivities, but often we can do so much. Yeah. So those are really the two main ones. So I've seen Lyme, a couple of people with like chronic Lyme. So everybody be careful with those ticks, because there's now 2 people that just contracted Lyme in my area, and they caught it very quickly. So fingers crossed, everything's going to be fine. But so that's pretty much it.
So what can people expect if they book a consultation? What happens?
So the consultation is, first of all, the initial consultation is a couple of hours. It is really your time to tell your story. And I kind of put on my detective hat, but also kind of my mother hat, right? It's a warm. I try to make sure it's a warm environment. But I will be, as a detective, I will be peeling off all the layers and trying to collect all the information that can give me the full picture of what we were talking about before. We're looking at the person and their current state rather than any kind of disease. Mm-hmm. So, that's in that first 2 hours, I'll get most of the information, but usually it'll be over the next few that I get even more, because people have a lot to say. We haven't been listening to doctors don't give you 2 hours to talk to them. Naturopaths, yes, but so so as a part of that, of course, like I said, all the detective work, we'll talk about what your key concern is first. Then I'll kind of circle around that to see, for that kind of concern, what are all the things that might be implicated that we would want to focus on first. Yeah. So just trying to think here. So let's say if someone has heartburn, we would then be focusing on diet, but also on digestion, elimination, antibiotic use. We would go kind of down that rabbit hole, I guess you might call it. So it will be different for each one. And then looking at the person, right? So we can tell a lot by looking at a person and looking at their skin tone, how they're sitting, how they're relaxed, if they're holding things tight, especially with musculoskeletal issues. Then once I feel like we have the whole picture, or at the end of that 2 hours, I usually take a couple of days to put out a healing plan together, which will be focused toward what your key complaint was.
Yeah.
Even though there might be all kinds of underlying things, we know that you have maybe you've been diagnosed with such and such. What is your focus? So we start with that.
Yeah.
And then we keep everything else in mind while we're focusing on that. And then maybe there'll be other things, secondary things that we can work on later. So that'll be in the plan. And I usually lay it out in a phased plan so that we know roughly how many months we need to work on something and when we are going to focus on, and when we change our focus a little bit from the first layer to the second to the third. And then I'll include some protocols. So almost always there's going to be an herbal tea and perhaps a tincture, maybe a flower essence. Lots of dietary suggestions always, and
I like you suggestions.
Of course,
careful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us know what we need to do,
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't help, but sometimes it really helps to hear someone say that, yeah, indeed, because we get so tired of hearing like, yeah, you got to exercise, you got to sleep, you got to, fruits and vegetables, drink lots of water. All those things just become kind of like, yeah, but there is actually a reason for it. And sometimes by seeing someone like myself, where it's explained a little bit, like I don't try, it depends on the person, how much detail they want. It's explained, it's like, this is why this is important.
Yeah.
Then perhaps it'll actually stick.
Yeah.
And it'll become a part of your life going forward. So that would be the plan, and then we would do follow-ups, see how things are going with the protocols, see how you're adjusting to the changes in the diet and such, and then see how your symptoms are doing. So we'll actually, grade your symptoms with frequency or on a scale. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's really intensive, and it's good because I think, I can only speak for myself. I know you go to the doctors, and you're not sure that they really understand. You're like, well, this is what I'm feeling, and okay, blah blah blah, and it's so rushed.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes you just need to make sure that a health professional understands what you're going through, and that they have a grasp, they heard you, and then when they say this will help, you trust that person because they understand the full story, as opposed to like a 5-second, like, okay, what's the problem?
Yes.
And then you say it, and then they go, there you go.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
You're not sure, right?
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing is that also being heard is part of the healing.
Yes.
It's a big part of the healing.
Yeah.
And it's partly because of what you just said, right? Because now you have a trust, you've built a relationship, and so, they're not just going to the pharmaceutical right away. And if they are, they're going to explain why and for how long, hopefully. But it must be very hard to be a doctor these days, because I find 2 hours is not nearly enough to get someone's whole story. Not for me, anyways. Maybe with more experience I'll be faster, but 2 hours, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know how. How it can be done.
Yeah, I agree. So I was fascinated when I heard about 2 of the tools you use in your assessment. You look at people's tongues and you take their pulse.
Yes.
How does that work? So
these come from, I was saying earlier too about looking at people's faces and looking at their tone and looking at, and there would also be touch. Sometimes, like, I wouldn't use pulse every time. I'm not that experienced with it yet, but I always would use it with someone with cardiovascular issues or any kind of issues with circulation whatsoever. And so, you would basically be taking their pulse. The traditional Chinese medicine, this is one of their key tools, and it takes a lifetime to really learn how to do that correctly. And I'm not there, but I do know some basics that I can look for that will tell me something about what's going on inside the body, because we don't have machines, we don't have testing, herbalists we can't send people for tests. So that's one of the tools. And so it would be, often a very, like, a long read of a pulse to get a sense of the quality of it, the speed, the force. What I most rely on much more often is the tongue analysis. And so the tongue is like this map of the body. Different parts of the tongue represent different parts of the body. And so then we would look at color, shape, if there's like a coating, there's so much that we can see from looking at the tongue.
That's so cool.
But then once we have that, we say, okay, here's a picture, and we draw it out, or I might take a photo. That will then also be a diagnostic tool sorry, I can't use that word, an assessment tool in the future to see improvement, right? So what does that tongue look like now? Oh, the cracking is better. There's more moisture there, or that sort of thing. So they're all part of the detective tools.
Yes.
Not one or like I don't use any one as the only thing. They're all part of the whole picture. That you just kind of like then you just throw it up and you just once you have it, I just kind of like let it sit all around me and I just try to absorb it for a few days before I get a really good sense of it.
That's so cool. I just found it fascinating. When I read it, I was like, what? The tongue? Because, it just seems
it's amazing.
So different.
It's like the best clue. We can't see inside the body, but we can see the tongue.
Yeah.
So look at your tongue, everybody, and see what you can see.
What does your tongue look like? I used to tease my mom because her tongue has these like cracks in it. When you're saying cracks, and I used to call her steak tongue because it looked like one of those cheap minute steaks. I'd be like, "Hey, steak tongue," because I don't know why. It was like, what is going on with your tongue? So when you say that, Mom, look at your tongue. So, can you share some steps people can take to improve their health?
Well, so to keep it really simple and I guess I have one herb thing I can say because most of my things wouldn't be herbs usually, but incorporate herbs into your foods. Herbs are plants. Plants are food. Herbs are tasty. Our ancestors have been using them for a reason. So like when we talk about all those tasty ones, like the turmeric and the thyme and the sage and the rosemary, like use those in your dishes. Use lots of coriander, lots of fennel. Like, use a lot more than they say. Like these little teaspoons, right? You can't even taste that it's there. But anyway, so that would be the first thing is like food is your medicine. And medicine is your food, and it can be that way. So try as much as you can to incorporate it into your everyday life, and get excited again about the flavors of these herbs. But then aside from that, there's I think my most important one is to get time outside, and that's for me personally. Get time in nature, alone, or a dog. I find that one of the things you want to do when you're in nature is you want to quiet the mind. So you can do that very easily by just switching through your senses. So for a few breaths, just hear what you're hearing without putting labels on it. Then for a few breaths, smell all the fragrances of the forest. No labels, just absorbing it all. And then the same with visual, like textures and colors and what are you seeing. And just by doing that, and that's actually filling your mind with no chatter, right? So it's an easy way to meditate. You're filling your mind still. You don't have to empty your mind. And you do that, 20 minutes, half an hour, and the health benefits are a myriad. Mental health, physical health, spiritual health. I find that when I do go forest bathing, I call this, I do feel like I'm uplifted. I feel like I'm supported. I feel like I don't have to do it all myself. So spiritual as well.
Nice.
Yeah. Another thing is, especially with stress, and this is a stressful time, is to move. One of the best ways to move all those, all the toxic, adrenaline and all the stuff that's running through our bodies that are part of the stress response. They need to be able to get out of our bodies. Like our ancestors, when they had those fight-flight moments and they had the adrenaline flowing through them in the cortisol, they were moving.
Yeah.
They were running.
Yeah.
Usually, or they might have been hiding. But moving really helps to get it out. It's toxic. Same with emotions. If you feel your feelings, speak your truth. Yeah, it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do, but get those toxins, out of you.
Like the sweat lodge.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Nature, food, of course. I'm forgetting something else that's usually one of my key ones, but yeah, that's pretty good. Water, yeah, water is really important. Food is important, of course, but I think if there's going to be the three, it's going to be that time alone in nature, you know, the movement, and the third one I can't remember.
The herbs in your diet.
Herbs in your diet is very good. Let's see here, move your body. Yeah, so heart coherence. So this is breathing. I'm so glad that I took the time to look at my notes because this one's so important. So heart coherence, so we now know that we have three brains, right? We got our gut brain, our heart brain, and our brain, our nervous system. And so we actually sense through our heart more than we do through any of our other senses. The information goes through here before it even gets up here. It's so critical. So when you're in nature and you are doing the forest bathing, when you're taking those breaths, you can just imagine that you're breathing into your heart and feeling gratitude, whatever works for you. And I heard something the other day that really I just loved, and it was imagine coming home. Imagine the feeling of coming home. And in that breath is bringing you home. Something like that, right? Like, that's something you can anchor yourself to, because we all can, like, yeah, gratitude, it can be hard, we gotta work, it's good, it's awesome. But I love that when they said that, coming home, I immediately felt what that meant for me and how it feels in my body. And then to breathe through that, that's like that heart coherence. And the coherence, we are coherent with each other right now. It's when we start kind of oscillating at the same time. That's what nature does for us. If you go to the Heart Math Institute, you've been there. So you understand what I'm talking about, right? It's like 5 minutes so many times a day, and your heart health will improve. There's so many studies they've done now to see how much people have regained the vibrance of health just through that heart coherence. And like, it can tell us a lot, right, about rights and wrongs and decisions. Got to.
And gut.
Get out of this one. It's not supposed to be a master.
Well, I was just going to say, I heard from Heart Math, I think it's on their website or it's on something I read about them, that your brain always has to listen to your heart, but your heart does not always have to listen to your brain.
Yes, I think that I don't know exactly how that. I do know for certain that's what the case with the enteric nervous system, the gut. I think it's the same direction. Same with, so if you cut the vagus nerve, which is which connects the two, you can still keep digesting. It's got enough of its own nervous system that it can function. And the same with the heart, I believe, like you said, right? You don't need. In fact, it gets in the way too much. So remember to appreciate our hearts. That's why I'm wearing my heart necklace.
So, other than the forest, where can people find you? There's lots of different places.
So now that summer is over, probably my last market. So I go to markets less frequently now with COVID. But that's a really good place to catch up with me if you just want to, like, I've seen all your supplements and I just want to see which one fits me best. You can see me there. I love seeing people. But that's over.
Which ones do you go to?
Right now, this year I did do the Barhaven Market because the other ones that I did closer by were not open. I do have a home clinic, but it's not really open to the public yet. I might do something where I might be open one day a week. My products are available now at Healthily Ever After in Merrickville. Email is Tanya@bewildherbs.com. If you have any questions, I love to hear people asking those questions. Like, okay, well, you've got this and this and this. Which one would be, so the kinds of questions I get at a market, I welcome people to send me an email. We could follow up with a call if it's more complicated. That's not a problem. And then my website is bewildherbs.com. Facebook is bewildherbs, and
very consistent.
Instagram is herbsbewild.
Ooh,
but I'm terrible with social media. I'll try to do better, and I'll try to also, it's my goal really to offer more programs, workshops, where we can incorporate going out and gathering things and then making things with them. So stay tuned for next year. Next year will be the year. Or maybe even this winter.
What about your kits? Are you selling the kits?
Yeah, so I've got one kit's in the store already at Healthily Ever After. for the market this Saturday, I'll have the the wild broth booster, and then probably in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have one that's going to be like for the bliss balls, like all those adaptogen powders that you can either make into nut balls or put into coffees or smoothies or that kind of thing. So I'll just keep adding to it. My website, they're not on my website store yet because I don't have pictures, but I will try to put something up in the coming weeks. But the easiest thing for people to do is just to email me and say, hey, where do I get more of that broth stuff? And then I do porch drop off now as well as shipping. And then of course I really like Healthily Ever After for people to go there because I like to support them. They've been just amazing in supporting me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You are a fascinating woman. I love what you do, and I love sharing it.
Thank you.
With other people. So give her, or I was going to say give her a call, email her if you want some information, or check her out at the markets while they're still open.
This Saturday. It's until it stays warm. I'll be at markets longer, but I don't like being in the cold.
Yes, yes, I hear you. When you were talking about the different, how some people like cold climates and other people like warm, that would have been, when they say game changer when you're like picking a partner.
Yes.
I could not have married somebody who doesn't want to go away.
No.
Who's like, oh, let's go skiing and like embrace the winter. No, I couldn't have done it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.